I also think one principle is this, there's like this archetypal death rebirth. And I sort of think there's this restless need to evolve in humans. And we kind of want to like kill off our current lame ego state so that we can evolve to something higher and better. And it's like this death rebirth impulse, I think, is maybe also part of it.
Oh, dude.
We now bring you Enter the Freud.
This podcast is for entertainment only and not intended for medical purposes.
If this is the episode potentially known as, is it self-harm or is it self-expression, right? From bifurcated penises to bull riding to what is it actually? Like most people think of it, if we're going to say self-harm, self-injury, self-mutilation, then it's like cutting, burning. That's like classically what people think it is. But what we're about to find out, all the way into realms of auto-asphyxiation to, like, it's such a vast territory. And the part that I'm so fascinated to is to get your depth psychology perspective of why does this happen? And maybe it's not even, you may not even have a depth psychological explanation, because it's almost like the treatment of it starts to reveal what is the intelligence behind this design. Like, people are not fucking doing this unconsciously. Like, they do it with actual purpose, I think.
Yep, totally. I totally agree. No, I think it's a great question. I think it's a mysterious question, and there's no way you can answer it without sort of getting into big metaphysical, esoteric spirituality ideas.
Yeah, well, you could answer it in just like a straightforward, like, to self-harm is to mutilate, and then that is an illness, and it leads to suicide. The comorbidity...
Right, but then, like, where's the line between actual just, like, cutting versus this, like, penis-splitting stuff, you know, versus drinking way too much versus... like the S&M stuff where they put a bunch of needles in their body, like where it's just gray area.
Yeah. Right. Okay, yeah. If we were to say that all things that involve injury to your body are self-harm and mental illness that leads to suicide, then that is totally not okay. There's no way that would be the case. If so, you and I are about to go to Montana and we're going to ski some stuff that could potentially cause injury, right?
Yep.
And unless we take some precaution and get pretty good at self-arrest, like none of us are going down the big couloir, right? Like none of us are going to do there's another one off the back that, like, if you fall and just like tumble 100 yards, like some of us have seen, like you might go off a 200-foot cliff, right?
Yeah, dude.
And so that in itself points out that, like, well, a lot of stuff that we do could lead to death. But then, do you think there's a need to point out the intention behind it? Like, if you're self-harming for the intention of regulating your emotions, which is very commonly what we see in clinical practice, right? Versus a super risky behavior. Like, if when we're up there and we see this guy, Dan Egan, I'll point him out to you. He's one of my dad's friends, and I was riding the lift with him, and he was telling me one time, he's like, I'm writing a book called Dying to Ski because everyone I know is dead. He's a pro skier. He's a pro skier from the 80s, and legitimately, like, the majority of his friends died skiing.
Wow.
Because of the shit that they were doing, jumping off of out of a helicopter and landing on a glacier, and like they just kept trying to go bigger and bigger and crazier, and they died.
Yep.
Right. So I guess.
Yeah, some depth psychology schools would say that humans are that there's this mysterious, some I think would even call it like dark or even demonic force in humans that lead us to want to explore those realms, and that it's kind of part of being human. Like if part of being human is making art, or if part of being human is wanting to dress, some people would say part of human is wanting to like walk and explore the edges of violence and death and these kinds of things.
Whoa. That's super fascinating, because like when you say it like that, it's like, oh wow, okay, I can see that. But then to admit this in a clinical setting that's paid for by insurance companies, they're not gonna like what you just said. They're gonna say, we're not paying for that. We're not we are not gonna pay for this, right? Like,
no, absolutely.
Unless you are an imminent threat to yourself or others, we will not pay for you to get therapy and or go to an inpatient facility, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the reason is because what insurance does is cover medical care, and what medical care ultimately is it's trying to restore a person from lesser functioning back up to optimal functioning as a cog in the capitalist system. And that works fine if you break your arm, you want to restore it back so that you can get back to work. Or like if you're depressed and you're laying around in bed and you want to get therapy to restore it so you can go back to work. But what gets tricky is that getting back to work, there's all these regions of the psyche that's not what they're trying to do. And so that whole part of the psyche, and it's a significant one, is not in line with the let's restore you back to being a functioning cog in the system, because part of our soul is like, fuck being a functioning cog in the system, fuck the system's fucked up, I want to do a different thing.
Yeah.
And that's not in line with the bureaucratic health insurance machine.
No, oh my God. It's such a big, bizarre problem that I think a lot of what we see... okay, so I don't know too much about the statistics. Once upon a time, I geeked out hard on this. Like, why is it that women self-harm twice as much as men in the classical sense, right? In the classical sense of cutting and or maybe like asphyxiation or
cigarettes,
burning, right? Like that is typically twice as much as men. But then it's like they're not including the shit that men do that is just outrageous. Like I said bull riding, but it's just like, dude, if you go to a rodeo and you see these bull riders, like,
absolutely,
they are so broken everywhere. Everything is smashed. Motocross guys are just completely debilitated at some point. Like, what about boxing? Like, or just fighting in general. Like, there's no way you get into the ring that, like, with the plan that you're going to Conor McGregor knock the guy out in one punch, and that, like, that never happens. You go in and you get your face smashed, and then you hopefully just beat the other guy worse.
Absolutely. Football is the most popular sport in America right now, and all those fuckers end up with serious long-term chronic brain injury.
It's okay, right? So there's something about like this thing, like what is acceptable injury, and then what goes into like, oh well, that's a mental disorder. Like, do you think we should just put a pin in that and say like, what is that? Why is it?
Yeah. Let's kind of play with the gradations. So pretty much everyone would agree that a woman who's super depressed, hates herself, gets overwhelmed with fucking intense, painful things, and then so she takes out a razor blade and cuts herself. Pretty much everyone would classify that as mental illness behavior. But no one ever thinks really to qualify the super extreme skiing or the rodeo riding or the football playing. No one ever really describes that as mental illness behavior. Okay, so there's sort of our two goalposts there. But then there's all these gradations in between those two where it starts to get kind of tricky. Like, how about like kinky sex stuff? Like, what if a woman, it could be any gender, but just to make the point, like I was watching this podcast and there's this woman who just like has sex as much as she can all the time. And occasionally, she said one time she went to some sex club and she got fucked by like 200 guys in one night.
Whoa.
And that's just one night. And she kind of every day she's having as much sex as she possibly can.
Whoa.
And she was on the podcast, and she sort of made it clear that as soon as they stopped filming, she was going to fuck both of the guys who was interviewing her on the podcast.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, see, that does, it's in the definition of, when you look up self-harm, like overly promiscuous is part of the clinical definition. That's just one of the categories, right? Like using sex for some reason is considered that. I don't know why, but it is. And so in that sense, this person would be considered to be struggling with some kind of a disorder. Now, they don't have a disorder for non-suicidal self-harm. They don't have a diagnosis, but they're working on one in the DSM-5, I think. They're trying to figure out one, mostly once again so that insurance companies don't have to pay for that. Notice in the term itself it says non-suicidal, right? And I don't mean to be a conspiracy weirdo. Like, I'm not even going to say one more sentence about insurance. Like, that it's just that is a diagnosis coming out, and like to differentiate in that way kind of makes a distinction between, well, some of these behaviors don't lead to death, and then is that because the person doesn't intend to die from it? Or, like, for example, if one of the things you're doing is I choke myself with this like Velcro band and I pass out, and then there's a pulse that brings me back to consciousness. Well, eventually you're gonna fucking die doing that. You're not gonna kick from the pulse. Someone isn't gonna find you, and you that person might say, I have no intention of killing myself. This is a thing I do, and I'm super into it. Whatever. And then
which makes me think of Dave Stuckey, who we've talked about before. When he was, in the months leading up to his death, he would drive from LA to San Francisco fairly often. And while he was driving, he'd practice holding his breath for as long as he could.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd practice holding his breath until he started to pass out while he was fucking driving on the freeway.
Yeah.
And I remember Rich was always like, dude, you need to fucking, you're like pushing the edge of death too far. And no, we didn't think about it in the sense of cutting at all.
Yeah.
But he just was wanting to flirt with this, and then he would go free diving, and he would flirt with the edge of it, and he flirted too much, and he killed himself.
Yeah.
And is that mental illness, or is it just the same thing as the skiers?
Yeah, it would be really hard to say that guy was mentally ill. Like, knowing him and being around him and seeing what he did in the field of psychology. Like,
totally.
Like, if that is mental illness, he's a very unusual form of super, super high functioning mental illness.
I would say his mental health is better than 95% of people.
Yeah, right. But then there is this supremely high risk behaviors constantly going on, and then it's like, I don't know what that is. Would you say that somebody who continuously engages in said high-risk behaviors, because there's a lot of them out there, depending on what kind of sports you look at, and like what is their personality types, what are they doing, right?
Yep.
Like what about bodybuilding, right? Like professional bodybuilding, where Your goal is to inject as much anabolic steroids so that you can build the most giant physique, but that is pharmacologically foreshortening your future. And if,
Totally.
And if that's not a real saying, I'm making one up right now. Like they are going to die early as a result of it.
Yep.
And is that I'm sorry that it's just like a flood now that we're talking about it. It's like a flood of examples.
It's an interesting flood. Okay, let's start to give some like explanatory perspectives on it, because a bunch of very different ones come to mind. So I'll throw this one out there first. All of this and weightlifting, you mentioned bodybuilding, but my mind went to weightlifting, and then my mind went to like this cold bath, this ice bath thing that's gotten so popular. And both intense weightlifting, or it doesn't have to be weightlifting, training of any kind, like running super, super hard, or and ice baths, it sort of makes me feel like there's this experience people have where they push themselves into pain. And something about pushing yourself into pain, we're compelled to do it, and oftentimes it's like sanity promoting afterwards. It's something about sitting around on your couch and watching Netflix and eating and chilling, just like the life of comfort leads to some shitty stagnation versus pushing yourself into pain somehow is clarifying and grounding and helps you be more sane in some weird fucking way.
Okay. Well, so I think that's like a continuum of cutting to regulate your super overwhelming emotions, right? And then if we move that on the continuum over to a more normal functioning human being, and we say like, okay, yeah, you have had lack of real loud stimulus because of the fact you are too comfortable for too long, right? And so let's ignite a big pulse in your experience of this week, and then from that you will have a self-regulatory experience. And like, it's the same fucking thing. It's just one of them happens to be in a closer to I will die from what I'm doing.
Yep.
Right? Like this one over here is more close to suicidal versus over here, if you die from it, you didn't really mean to, but there's a chance that if you run long enough and hard enough, you can absolutely fucking die, as you see.
So, from that perspective, running super, super, super hard or staying in an ice bath super long is really kind of the same thing as self-cutting. Yeah. It's just the social narrative of it is different. Like self-cutting is bad, ice baths are good for whatever fucking reason. Okay, so let me give a gray area. I was seeing this, my son was filming a lot of tattooing at one point a couple years ago, and I was interviewing the people tattooing. There was this one dude who had just so many fucking tattoos, and I was interviewing him, and it was really cool. And he was talking about how he just thinks he's addicted to the tattoos, and that he kind of gets a little high when he's getting the tattoos, and it sort of had this feeling like, oh, there's part of what he's doing is self-expression or whatever, but part of it is just the same thing as cutting, is he goes in and gets jabbed with a needle a million times, and there's maybe sort of just like an endorphin rush or something that's the same thing as cutting.
For sure.
And then I heard the story of this dude, it was kind of a famous story on a podcast, who I think it's just the same thing. So this guy I'm talking about, he had a lot of tattoos. People wouldn't really say that what he's doing is mental illness because it's sort of like socially acceptable. But then this dude got a tattoo, but he didn't really like tattoos. And then he'd go back every week and have that tattoo artist just re-tattoo the exact same tattoo. Whoa. Just because I think he fucking liked the pain of it.
Wow. Wow. That one's pretty interesting. Like it kind of reminds me of the idea of branding, but once again, I'm just a floodgate of examples just flashing through my mind of how much of this goes on that is somewhere on the verge of, like, we're gonna at some point have to call this self-harm, but then it's self-harm at the expression of one's inner world trying to match this outer world. That now, if we try to understand, why is this becoming more of a phenomenon? And without a doubt, it is. Like, there are more people who self-harm today than ever, and it's not like, oh, previously no one ever admitted it. Well, I'm sure that's a factor. It's just like it is, and I don't mean the social contagion of adolescent girls who see other girls do it in school, and so then they try it, like the way that girls try to be bulimic. And then, like, if you ever talk to girls who grew up in our era, many of them will say, oh, I tried to be bulimic. Like, it was a thing that happened in the 80s where everyone was like, oh, we go in the bathroom and we try to throw up. And, a lot of them were like, oh, I couldn't do it. It was like not like only a few people were actually bulimic, but then everyone was trying it.
I remember that, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's something, like, I gotta tell you, there was a really cool experimental treatment where they took people who had been hospitalized on average 30 times for suicidal behavior, and like not just self-harm, like actually hospitalized for suicide. Some of them were hospitalized hundreds of times, and they were all put in this institution that did not take away all of the self-injurious objects, right? Like, this is super fascinating when you think of it as why was this treatment so successful? Now, of course, it's controversial, but so rather than give everyone plastic spoons and knives and take away your shoelaces and any paper clips or anything that you could, because people who are institutionalized who self-harm, they kind of revel in their ability to find ways to get like a staple to then stab into their arm.
I've worked in those places and watched those people do that.
Right? So this is the thing. So I can't remember the name of this place, and that is going to plague me. But they start this treatment where it's like, you can, if you're going to self-harm, go ahead and self-harm. But then you have to explain to us why we should allow you to stay in the program. Like, you get one chance to you can join the program voluntarily, and then if you self-harm, you have to explain to us why we should allow you to stay here. And unbelievably, giving people the option to do it on your own, but then actually receive the treatment was entirely about giving them the agency rather than taking it away, giving them the sense of psychological control that this is within your realm of control, and then you can do something about it or not. And if you need that fix so much, and rather than all of the alternatives that they provided, right? It's like, hey, you can come and join this group right now. You can go and talk to this person right now. We can process your emotional state right now.
Yeah.
You're in an inpatient facility right now, rather than just be like, oh, let me go and hide in a room and stab myself the way that I used to.
Yep.
And it was so goddamn effective. And so that it really made me start to think about, and when I say effective, I mean people 30 years later had no longer drank vodka to the point that they were alcohol poisoned, which I've never fucking done that. And I've consumed a lot of alcohol, right? But I've never done it with the intention of like, I'm going to fucking hurt myself, right?
Yeah, right.
That's different in the same way of like I'm going to burn myself with this cigarette instead of like, I smoked it until, oops, it burnt my finger. Like,
right.
Super fucking different.
Yep.
But so it made me think about like what's going on in today's world where a lot of us experience this kind of lack of agency and a lack of ability to, see how to function. Do you? I can't even finish the sentence. Do you know where I'm getting at? Can you? pick up what I'm...
Yeah, well, this idea I think is related. Is I sort of feel like the evolution of all life on planet Earth was like a pretty fucking epic battle for survival always. And I sort of think that's just in our DNA, as we're these like battling for survival creatures. Mm-hmm. And as in the past few hundred years, as we've become better and better at making ourselves not have to battle for survival, that demon is still in us, but it doesn't really have a battle to fight most of the time.
Yeah.
And so it starts doing weird fucking things. Because like it's gonna try, it's like the demon wants to come out and fucking wrestle, but you know, no one has to do that anymore. You can just sit around, watch Netflix all day. Everyone can pretty much just sit around, watch Netflix, and eat ice cream all day if they want. Pretty much everyone can do that now in America.
Yeah.
You know, even fucking poor people can get in like subsidized housing, get on food stamps, get a friend's Netflix account, and just like sit around and just eat junk food and watch Netflix. Even if you're just fucking poor, you could do that.
Yeah, right. And so, but since that's a total possibility, what do you think this does to one's psychology? That would then potentially, because I'm assuming you're bringing this up of the life that is without significant hardship, right? And to say like, oh, like being extremely poor in America is not without hardship. Like that's not what I'm fucking saying at all, right? But
right.
Without
but it's not the hardships that all life forms had 1,000 years ago. Of like, if you don't get up and get going fucking hard, you're gonna die today. If you don't start the fire, kill the elk, fight off the fucking jaguar, fight the neighboring tribe, whatever.
Yeah.
You know. Is like, I just think that was the norm of all life for fucking 1 billion years, and I don't think we have it. But I think that warrior is in us, and if I kind of want to take this beyond evolutionary psychology,
yeah, go.
Get kind of the spiritual is that like the life force in humans, and I think the life force on planet Earth is like we want to like do epic shit, and we want to like be warriors or creators of new fucking possibilities in the universe.
Yeah.
And that force is powerful in us. And sitting around watching Netflix, that force just starts to get fucking angsty and starts to make me want to cut myself or go ski until I die or go fucking ride a bull in the rodeo, you know?
Yeah. Well, so I see as it's kind of drifted into almost like a cultural commentary, a social commentary of that. Like, so the other day I was trying to find a list of values for one of my patients for us to talk about, like, hey, here's all the goals we've been talking about, but let's talk about your specific values. What do you think are, because she's a super unique person, and I was like, oh, let's find out, like, what are the ones that you fit with? And I noticed all the lists of values given by CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or acceptance commitment therapy, or that goes into the business world. They have lists of them that, oh, if you're this type, like, this is why you'll be a good manager or CEO, whatever. But then I noticed they're all desirable values. I could not find a list of negative, maladaptive values. And I thought, why is that? What the fuck? Like, there's no one has a list of this? Like, why doesn't anyone care? Like what values do Nazis have? Like, don't you think that's so obvious? Like, do Nazis have good values? Like, maybe it's they're industrious, right? They're pretty fucking organized, but then there's some really bad shit going on there, right? Like, there's.
Well, I think there's like a philosophical worldview, spiritual debate here that I think a lot of people, without thinking about it, would say that humans, you know, ultimately we're good and that we want good things, and that if like we get the proper thing, there's the presence, we'll strive towards good. But then there's these less well-known philosophical ideas out there, like Freud's the death principle, so eros and thanatos, is an example. And Jung, I think, took that even farther. And then Nietzsche has some, and there's in Machiavelli, and there's these but you don't hear about those much. Of that, no, humans have impulses towards other shit too. And I think that's not really, our culture doesn't really want to reckon with that.
Whoa. Well, certainly, because I actually very rarely hear anyone talk about those aspects of psychology. It's like everyone wants to talk about positive psychology.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to talk about cognitive behavioral. Let's do a cognitive reappraisal. Well, you never reappraise to make sense of how the world is completely fucked and living within it is going to be a vicious challenge. Like they're like, that's not what we're talking about. We're going to reappraise that. Actually, no, you are lovable. You do have qualities that people like, and it's like, dude, I feel the need in this moment to be like, embrace the dark side, but then I'm also having this like internal struggle of like, oh, and I realize we're not functioning as professionals right now. This is our like alternate persona podcast self, where you can actually just say stupid shit, but right. like I feel that still need to be like cautious and say like, man, this world of self-harm is so dangerous, and people are so like hurt, and their families are hurt, and they're hurting, and they need to be recognized as people, not just as like, oh yeah, you have this thing that makes you weird, and now you have to go away to a hospital, and hopefully when you come back you don't have it.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like,
totally. Yeah.
Your explanation
Absolutely.
makes this so much more normalized to say like, oh wait, all humans have this to some degree, but when it gets expressed really loudly, like if you decided something really bizarre, like I'm going to chop my arm off and then go have it reattached. I mean, that's pretty fucking out there. I don't know if anyone's ever done. Someone has to have done that.
I bet they have.
Right? That's really out there. But like in the pursuit of finding out what do you think the more pressing thing that happens to you in your kind of adult life now that you're mature? Like, what is it that, like, I remember last summer when we jumped off that bridge, right? Like, that was a great, healthy way to put yourself into a thing that really scared the shit out of me. And and caused my son to have a panic attack a little too early. He was a little too young, but like it's kind of like that thing where, you know, I was telling these other surfers down in Nicaragua, I was like, yeah, dude, my son, we were skiing and we crashed and it broke his fucking leg because there was this heli skiing guy there, and he's like, and his response was, yeah, at 12, dude, it's kind of a rite of passage. You gotta break a bone.
Yeah.
Right, but that's coming from a heli ski guide.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what it in your life, what do you think? I know I hate to put you on the spot like this, but like how do you express this this otherwise human need? Like, you don't have a million tattoos, do you?
I know.
Do you secretly
and
have
I feel
them?
like no. And I don't think I do. Yeah, it's a good question. Let's just use me as an example. I don't know if this is even relevant, but I sort of feel like for much of my first half of my life, I had like some mission that I was wanting to accomplish. Like, okay, that's what I need to do. I need to accomplish that thing. And I worked really hard for it. And the only pain I would subject myself if we're comparing self-cutting to lifting weights, the main pain that I had subjected myself was working really hard. I just worked really hard, kind of a lot. And it's sort of like, it's kind of subjecting yourself to pain when you wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. and you don't want to get up, but you force yourself to get up and go start working. I think that's maybe this similar idea, just like forcing yourself to go to the gym or forcing yourself to get in the ice bath is kind of this forcing yourself into pain. And I think working really hard is probably one really good, healthy way to channel that. Just like fitness is another really good, healthy way to channel that.
Oh, yeah. I can't believe...
But then I got to say, after I sort of met my goals and did the things that I set out to do at some point, probably when I was around 40, I kind of lost this mountain, this metaphoric mountain to climb. I kind of lost it, and I've been a little more angsty, and I go to the gym harder now or whatever, but it's a little bit more like, I don't know, I think I have more of an angsty thing in me.
Well, then we'll just have to go jump off some small cliffs in Big Sky. But
go heli skiing, and maybe I need to start getting tattoos.
And to maintain so that we don't drift too far towards Dave Stuckey, if you're gonna do risky shit, you have to do it with competence. Like, you have to practice self-arrest 100 million times before you go and fall down a fucking cliff. Like, otherwise you are naively, like, there's this wave in Nicaragua that is like, all these pros come to ride it when it gets really big, but this, for some reason, the way the deep water hits this reef, it dredges up and just terminates people right onto the reef. And so it's so fucked up that, like, I sat there on the cliff watching all these guys just walk back trailing blood. Everyone walking back had been drilled onto the reef. And I just thought, like, so then if you paddle out, you're coming home beaten. Like,
wow.
What? Like, there's like a 50% chance on that day you were going to, if you took a wave, you were going to get drilled. And some of them were like seriously bad and life-threatening, right?
Wow.
It's so crazy to think, like, and there's no way you could convince me to paddle out in that. Ever. Right? I'm not going to do it. I don't want to have that kind of a guaranteed, like, it literally, you flip a coin to find out. Either you get some minimal glory of a photo of you in that wave versus, like, terminated on the reef. And one of these pros, I was talking to him afterwards, and he says, he's like, I had the inflatable vest and everything, and I still am reconsidering if I'm going to keep doing this.
Wow.
Yeah. He was taking all the precautions, and I was like, wow, that's, but to stay within the ideas of what does one do? Like, what do you do when you're like 70 and you still have this? Like, do you not have it anymore when you're 70?
That's a good question. I bet you still do. I sort of feel like your dad still has it and fucking wrestles with it, and don't you think?
Well, you're gonna go see him. He's actually getting injected with cortisone in his back the day before we get there, so that he can charge. Like, this dude is, I don't know. We're gonna have to go see. I think maybe he does have it, but he's maybe on the spectrum, as we pointed out. One of his friends is Dan Egan, right? Like,
right.
So, like, I don't know what. Well, like, do all people have that? And then,
no, it does seem like different people have different amounts, and I think men, there's a certain thing we're talking about that I feel like on average, not always, but on average, men have it more than women.
Right, but that seems so counterintuitive to clinically, women self-harm more and are in treatment more for self-harm.
Yeah.
And they attempt suicide significantly more. But then once we've expanded the definition into just like, wait, how many things do people do that are going to cause significant bodily harm? And it's just like, oh my God, it's men wear those stupid squirrel suits and jump off the cliff. They hang glide right into the side of the cliff. They do this like endless amount of what are men doing inventing all these ways?
There's a self-destructive want to live on the edge, want to fucking wrestle with the scary edge of fucking the cliff.
Yeah, right. And that's where I was hoping today's discussion would somehow illuminate why is this, and then if there is this kind of attack on masculinity. I know it's just like in the background, and who's really saying that like masculinity is toxic? Like, I don't really know, and I don't give a fuck, right? Like, I don't know.
I also think one principle is this: there's like this archetypal death rebirth, and I sort of think there's this restless need to evolve in humans, and we kind of want to like kill off our current lame ego state so that we can evolve to something higher and better. And it's like this death rebirth impulse, I think, is maybe also part of it.
Oh, dude. Okay, I gotta say, that is maybe my favorite part of this talk. I like right there, that was what I was looking for, is like a way to understand it, because otherwise I keep seeing it through this like larger like social phenomenon that I can't quite put my finger on. But that piece where you just were able to point out like, okay, we have to then get rid of our egoic state because we are in constant evolution through each decade. Right? That's why I said, hey, when you're 70, are you still like this? And you said at 40, you kind of, the hill isn't so easy to identify, right?
Yeah.
Unless you and your son decide, let's fucking climb Everest. Right? Like, whoa, that's...
Yeah.
that would be quite a challenge. But whatever. Is that it, or what?
Oh, I think it's complex. I think there's a lot of things that come together, but I do think this death rebirth thing, the part of it that is this death rebirth, weirdly, then it looks like a healthy impulse. It's like an impulse towards growth and higher evolution, and we want to kill off the lame, stuck level we're at. We want to like fucking destroy that, and like something cool emerges out of the death of that thing. But it's not all that. There is pathological. It's a mix of pathological and healthy, and twisted and strong, and it's a complicated mix, I think.
Yeah, it is. And every once in a while you see someone who's like drifted into the pathology of it, and as a result they have all the scars and markings, but then now they're in a different place where they've reached a different decade. And now they have the markings of the past of being in the dark, but now they're in this other realm. You know how you meet some people like that? Totally. I kind of like that, and I always have as a little dude. Like I would see these like much more mature versions come along, and then I would see them with their like neck tattoos in a suit like a swami, and I would be like, oh my God, like this dude now is a monk who then came like that to me would always strike me, and I was like, oh whoa, and not that I wouldn't want to emulate it, but I would see it, and then I would feel like I would be like, wow, I'm that much closer to something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what is that? What am I doing? What is it close to? It's like,
It makes me think of the hero's journey, like the dude, just the ordinary boring dude who lived in the boring village, and then he had to go on a fucking epic journey, went down into the darkness and wrestled with some monsters, and he got all fucked up and scarred.
Yes.
But then he came back to the village, and now he's back, and now he kind of has a more calmness because he knows what the fucking world is really like.
Oh my God. Dude, the voice of reason. Nice. Dude, you're fucking killing it today. All right, man. Hey, let's wrap it up. Dude, by the time I see you next, right? We will... Wait, no. We have one more week.
No, we have one Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Okay, cool. All right, man. Till next time.
All right, dude.
Later.
Catch you later.